Great. So it's on now?
It's on now.
Okay, very cool. So at any rate, she prosecuted one of the cases of someone who was trying to, basically engage in economic extortion or so. So she's been cited as a good example, and she's a graduate of the program. And in fact, when I sort of mentioned it offhand, one of the staff people in the PR actually looked it up and found more information about it. So it's a big case, it's a big deal. I keep thinking, with as much trouble as the Alabama governor is getting involved in, will she be prosecuting that case? Boy, I wouldn't want to walk into that one. But last time she's actually come here for Constitution Day. She's come here for to be honored as the outstanding young alumni. You'd never know she was too afraid to speak in front of class. She actually told me. She said, "I don't want to do the presentation. Seriously, I'll take a 0." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not going to give you a grade then." "Oh, what am I supposed to do?" "Well, you're supposed to present. Everybody else is presenting. It won't kill you." Well, that's what she does now for a living, presenting in front of courts, and found that she's actually really good at it. Keep thinking about what you're going to be planning on, what you hope to do. On this paper, I've already had a few of them. Some of them look pretty good. I haven't looked over all of them yet. You let me know whether you want your name on there or not. If it's going to be anonymous, it's going to be anonymous. I've had that conversation by email with one person. It's a pretty good paper, actually. It's better than the American Experience papers I got. So it's like, I really hope you use your name because it's pretty good.
I tried to submit it online, but it wasn't working, so I had to print it out.
Okay, have them printed out to give them to me, but keep trying to get it in. People have loaded them up, so I know it's working in. I got Quentin's, I got Harrison's.
So we all do if it does fit.
No, post it on up. I think I've got it up. But you got to keep working it in because this is where we get the backup copy.
Okay, so I'm not the only one that couldn't get the.
We got to when we submit by electronic copy. But let me know. Go ahead, Jordan.
I gotta reset my computer, like delete all my documents.
Okay, get it on up today.
But I send it through Connect.
So what?
I send it through Connect.
Cool. Excellent. I look forward to it. I've only seen 3, but that was at 11 o'clock in the morning, so I assume some others have come on in. But get it on in today. Remember, it's just like April 15th. Everybody can have their taxes on in. So that's why we always work on ours in February if we can. Reminds me of a Simpsons episode where Homer Simpson is watching the news where everyone's frantically trying to get their taxes in. He goes, "Those idiots, I did that last year." And so Lisa goes, "Dad, you gotta turn it in this year." And so he frantically puts together taxes. The episode is about how he gets audited. All right, y'all did a little bit of looking at, you did a little bit of research. Let's go over our findings and then we'll get into the concept that undergraduate after undergraduate miss. So I want to make sure that you get this right because so many people blow it. Got to know it for the exam. Federalism, by the way, is the last thing you need to know for the exam. Yes, I know. On Wednesday, we'll be covering Congress. Friday is your exam. It'll be proctored, so get me your exam questions beforehand. Look for a practice exam coming up sometime early next week. Got it? So you'll see what an exam looks like. But you get a choice of multiple choice, you get a choice of essay. So if you've had me before, like some of you have, it's the same routine. Whether it's a 4,000 or a 1,000 class. Okay, remember, we can't cover every single detail about American government. Even in 2 semesters, you really couldn't get it all. So, some of what, rather than get you to memorize every single amendment, which you should look over the amendments. Remember, I want you bringing your book, The Irony of Democracy, and the other book, the Monroe book. Bring it to the exam so I know that you got it. It do not cost that much. You can even tell me how much you paid for it. Amazon.com, half.com, God bless America, you can find cheap books. If you're like, "Well, Dr. Travis, you required the 15th edition. I found the 14th edition for $5. Is that okay?" Yeah. That's why I signed a book with multiple editions so you can use an older one. I did that on purpose for you all, because I know what a textbook costs like. Honestly. I used to use a lot more textbooks until I worked in a textbook store for FSU, and I was like, holy crap. I'm making some kid pay $200 for this. That's why I not only offer books, but I use ones with multiple editions and let you get older versions. So some of yours might say Bill Clinton's president. Okay, you probably know that they're not, this person's not president. Maybe the examples are from the 90s, but federalism applies whether it's 1789 or 1989 or 2019. Make sense? So the concepts, the elitism versus pluralism, the media, it doesn't change, just the examples. And it's got a copy of the Constitution in it. So you get your very own copy of the Constitution. But make sure you keep on to it. It's one of the greatest documents in world history. Very revolutionary for its time. It allowed for amendments. That's one thing I loved about it. They realized that they couldn't resolve everything in a couple months, a couple weeks, a weekend or two. They couldn't cover every single debate. They realized, for example, the issue of slavery. It wasn't going to be resolved. In fact, we almost didn't have the Constitution because of slavery. Northerners wanted it out. Southerners wanted it in. Anybody know what the compromise is? I know it's not in the reading, but just... The Three-Fifths Compromise. So y'all have heard of this, right? What's the Three-Fifths Compromise say?
Slaves don't count as a whole person.
Now, what was...
Or it counts as property.
Why didn't they just say they don't count at all? Wouldn't that have been easier? If they didn't, if slave owners said that these aren't real people. Yeah, oh wow. See, you're using the language. I love this. I love when people are ahead of me on this. I wasn't even going to say that. You're working in the class. What it was is the Southerners wanted to have their cake and eat it too. And the Northerners wanted to call them on it. The Southerners wanted political power. And they wanted slavery. The Northerners are like, nope, you got to choose. It's up to you. You got to count slaves as human beings and therefore give them a vote if you want the political power from the representation of Virginia plan. Keep in mind, Virginia, slave state, non-slave state. North Carolina, big state, small state. If you want to win in the Electoral College, which is based on population, if you want to win in the lower house, you have to count blacks and more specifically slaves as voters if you want all of that power. The Southerners are like, no, because then our slaves will vote for freedom, which of course they would. And because the Northerners are like, ha, with fewer, and so the Northerners had their own political agenda. They're like, well, with fewer slaves, that means the South won't be able to dominate. Virginia gets a little smaller in population. Actually, it gets a lot smaller. South Carolina is not so strong. North Carolina is not so strong. Do you understand the debate? It's about political power, representation. Like delegates were ready to just walk out North and South. We almost didn't have a constitution. Then Ben Franklin came up. You ever heard this story? You know what he said? Nobody could decide. He says, it turns out that folks in North Africa, Muslims in North Africa, when they capture Christians and make slaves out of them, they count them as 3/5 of a person for tax purposes. Everyone goes, well, that's why it's called the Three-Fifths Compromise. Later investigation revealed that Franklin made it up. He just created the story, claimed it was a legend. Whatever reason, he came up with a story that everyone bought. But it kept the North and South together in this country. Now keep in mind that, it wasn't going to be the final word. I think Northerners realized that the Constitution could be changed, so that's what mollified them. So slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person. They weren't allowed to vote. They weren't counted as full people. Which I'm sure whites would have felt different if they were the slaves, being counted as 3/5 of a person. I'm just guessing. So it's not right, but at least the Constitution would stay together. And there was a chance to change it, to amend it. All right, what's the 13th Amendment to the Constitution? Dr. Torres, it's not up there. Yeah, I know, but since we're talking about it. Is what? Yeah, it ends slavery. It makes slavery illegal. We later found out, by the way, this is a true story. When I was a college student, 1989, sophomore year, a friend of mine from Louisiana was telling me, he goes, you know what? Mississippi has not ratified it. So slavery was still legal in Mississippi until 1989. actually, until they didn't ratify it until like 1993. A governor came in and who was fair, but anyway, somebody said, well, why don't we ban slavery in Mississippi? And he goes, we don't need to. Nobody has slaves here anyway. So even in the 1990s, you had politicians who still wanted to keep slavery on the books. No, I'm not joking.
90?
Yeah. Let's see. When did he leave office? I think it was in the mid-90s that Mississippi outlawed slavery. Now, as you pointed out, nobody in Mississippi was enslaving somebody else. Unless you work on like one of those farms where you sign a deal and you think you're getting a good deal, and in fact you're getting screwed over. But that's another story. So in other words, the Constitution changed to resolve the issue of slavery in the future. That's why, it was important to have that amendment thing. I think that's why Northerners signed the deal. They didn't like the deal. They wanted slaves to be free, either because they were abolitionists, they thought slavery was wrong, or for political purposes. Whatever the case, slavery was finally outlawed. Anybody seen the movie Lincoln? Raise your hand if you've seen the Lincoln movie. Oh, I need to show that as a CD. An Alabama congressman, who's a friend of mine, told me, he said, this is the best movie to show how Congress works. I think I might show it in this class. It's really well done, but it's the debate over the 13th Amendment. I'm sorry.
What's next Friday?
Oh, no, we got an exam, but sometime this semester. How about November? I'll show it. I was gonna have y'all do something else, but I thought everybody saw Lincoln.
I might have seen it.
It's really well done.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
In the 18th, not Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, although that's a cool one. My student's like, are you gonna go see Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter? I was like, oh yeah, of course, that's gonna be funny as hell. That was actually a pretty well done movie. Did you know that it was written by a guy who was basically a college student who was just barely get by, just trying to break even, and he wrote things like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. I read about him. He was a college student, no different from y'all. He just thought it'd be like really cool to do these things. I mean, he was just barely scraping on by. Yeah, look up about the author, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. It's a great success story. No, it says it can't be, just graduate first, and then remember us in your alumni when we send you notes. But yeah, in each case, we've seen amendment after amendment expanding freedom. Not all of them have. Have any amendments restricted freedom?
What's that again?
Have any constitutional amendments restricted freedom?
Yeah, open to drink.
Yeah, prohibition.
18th Amendment.
The 18th Amendment. You always remember it because
22nd.
18th Amendment, you can't drink when you're 18, but you can drink when you're
21.
21. And which amendment
21st.
legalized drinking? No, it's the 22nd. Trick question. No, okay, it is 21st. I just want to see if you were paying attention.
Not yet, I'll never remember that again, just because it's
Right.
your choice.
Right.
21st, yeah, 18 you can't drink, but 21 you can. I'll even talk about drinking and drugs and guns in school on Monday. Well, we'll see if I can get to it today. I'll at least try and get to the drinking part today, okay? Because it's Friday. Oh wait, I'm sorry, stupid me. You guys are all under 21, except for maybe Brian, so y'all can't drink, but or maybe one or two. We'll get to that. Let's look at political freedom first before we get to drinking. Did you? Okay, the camera's still rolling. I'm sorry. Cameras around and you just don't notice. I'm gonna need to do a little editing. Okay. Jacksonian democracy, eliminating property qualifications. African Americans getting the right to vote. Well, African American males. Women getting the right to vote. 1919 is when the 1920s is the first election they got to vote in. Just to point out, some places actually granted women the right to vote far earlier. This just meant that no state could deny a woman the right to vote. Some states have already jumped the gun, mostly Western states and territories. Poll tax eliminated, where you had to pay to vote. No literacy test for voting. Literacy test being highly fraudulent. I told this class a story about my professor. Did I tell you? Maybe it was the other class. He was from Louisiana. He was a Cajun, Lawrence LeBlanc. And when he was a student, he went in to vote. He's an old professor, so this is like 50s, before the literacy test. And he filled out his registration. They said, okay, what is the square mileage of Louisiana? Do you know the square mileage of Georgia? This is before we had these things. And this is before you could like Google it. I Googled one of my favorite dance songs from the 80s I played for the kids today. It's cool what these kids. I know. Grant Hill was making fun of me, the NBA star. When I was trying to take a picture, he goes, this is old school professor. I said, yeah, it still works.
What's
Picture
that
wasn't even
one?
that blurry. But anyway, he couldn't do that. He didn't have his cell phone with him, and even if the cell phones had been invented back then, they wouldn't have let him look it up. So he goes, I don't know. So the guy doing the voting pulls out like a little slab. It's like on barristers' desks. You ever see it? It's like this little slab, and it's got the answer on it. He tells him what the answer is. He whispers it to him. So he puts it down. He's allowed to vote. Push it back in. You go into the vote. This is back when they had curtains around your. They don't do that anymore. But you would go in curtains like you were going to the bathroom or something. Like it had to be private. So they put the curtain around, and he voted. And then he had seen an African American gentleman come in behind him. So he kind of peeked around from the curtain, and the guy filled out the form and got asked the same question. Do you think that they pulled the little sheet, the little wooden cheat sheet out for him? That's what's called a literacy test. Doesn't mean you're literate or not that you know to the nth degree what the square mileage of Louisiana is. It was just a way to restrict people. And before you think that this is a black and white issue, well, I should say a racial issue, just to let you know from what I've studied in history, when you discriminate against one group of people, you can discriminate against a lot of people. A lot of Alabama conservatives from that northeast part of the hill country, like up northeast of like even Gadsden or Jacksonville or so, you know, they found themselves facing the same thing because they were very conservative, they were very different from the Montgomery elite, the Birmingham elite. If you can make a literacy test to discriminate against blacks, you can keep white conservatives from changing things. Just keep that in mind. Every time I get an email that says, we ought to go back to literacy tests. You ought to be like literate enough to vote. And I kept thinking, make sure it's a literacy test first. And second, if you can restrict one person's right to vote, you can find a lot of other ways. Not better memorize your Georgia square mileage. How many counties are there in Georgia?
Isn't it like,
Yeah, I think it's like 159, 170. They're trying to create a new county. And then you go and say, like, you know, John Williamson goes in, he's like, yeah, 159. And they'll say, all right, name them. Did y'all see Selma? Like, how many judges are in Alabama? 82. Name them. Sooner or later, they'll find a question you don't know. Just keep that in mind. Believe it or not, if you trace all the way back to the end of literacy voting, that's when Southern conservatives started winning. Why is that? That's when Republicans started doing that. Why is that? It's not an accident, folks. Blacks weren't the only ones granted the right to vote under literacy tests. Keep that in mind, elitist theory for you. And of course, the 26th Amendment. What was so controversial about this? Why did they want to lower the voting age from 21 to 18?
You're old enough to go to war, you're old enough to go.
Now there was something going on that spurred people in 1970. What? Yeah. My dad was, he's fairly conservative. My dad's roommate went off to Vietnam and never came back. To this day, I just don't talk about Vietnam with him when we don't mention his name, and that's just the best way to do it. He just doesn't talk about it. But yeah, that was his college roommate. Was not 21. My dad very easily could have gone, since he actually, so the only difference he had is instead of being drafted in the military like his roommate, my dad was actually too poor to go to college, so he signed up for the military, you know, to get the GI Bill. Which is weird because if you signed up in the military, you didn't always get sent abroad. I know it sounds strange, but some people who volunteered, that's what happened. You know, they didn't get sent. He volunteered because he had to. but other people got drafted in, got sent on over. Yeah, many of them were under the, yeah, so my dad was in the military for several years after college and stuff, but he couldn't afford a college otherwise. He was the only one of the 10 kids, he was the youngest. He was the only one to go to college. He tried to get on a basketball scholarship. He's a decent player, a good shooter, but in fact, one of his rivals from college actually got an athletic scholarship, to Marquette, and then went on to win a NBA championship as the backup to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So that was kind of neat. I had a basketball card in him. So he played for the Cavaliers and a couple of teams, and then at the end of his career went to play for the Lakers. So, but it's kind of hard if you didn't have the money to go to college back then. I mean, join the military, or you had really good athletic talent, or you got a good academic scholarship. Luckily, his grades were also good enough to defray the rest of the costs, because the family farm went under his freshman year. Broke his dad's heart, literally. So that's why I've never met my grandfather on this side. Let's take a look. Two arguments. In the good old days, people used to participate much more in politics and stuff like that. Nowadays, we're lazier and we don't vote near as often. You've heard that argument, right? That's what elitism says. The masses don't vote. They're apathetic. They don't care. Pluralism is a little more optimistic. People will vote if given the chance. Democracy, they see as a good thing. People can make a difference in politics. Pessimism, optimism. This is just a hypothesis test. We're not going to prove elitism theory, right? We're not going to prove pluralism. This is just a bite-sized hypothesis test. You understand how that works? I was talking with some poli-sci majors. They were already using that language and talking about SGA resolutions to improve campus security. I love it when people put this stuff into practice. I even said, do you need me to go there and help argue on your behalf? No, we got it. Sounds like they do. So let's take a look to see what actually happened. This data comes not from America, but it comes from a scholar in Finland who looks at the percentage of people voting. Not just those registered to vote, because that could be applicable, just what percentage of the population voted. So in other words, he looked at the real numbers. And just say, think, oh, Finland, he's a socialist. No, he's a pretty conservative guy. He mostly studies wars and conflict. I'm just using this data. And it shows, voila! What do you notice right off the bat? Yeah. So in other words, just general trend. Give me the general trend. Harrison, what's going on?
Can I ask a question again?
Voting turnout going down, going up.
That's obviously don't know.
All right, so we got that. You're in the background, so I want to make sure you and Brittany and Brian can see. Right? So kind of an upward trend, right? All those images of, well, everyone's voting and sitting around the town crier reading stuff, and they're all voting and stuff. Well, very few people voted. So barely about half the population votes. Now, keep in mind, everyone under 18 isn't voting. Right? So that's a certain percentage. Anybody else know who's not allowed to vote besides those under 18? Yeah, we had an next door neighbor when I was in DC. It was a contentious election, 2000. A lot of people had voting stickers. I knew my next door neighbor didn't have one. So I asked him, I said, hey, I'll take you on, I'm a political science person. I said, I'll take you on over to the polls. I'll let you, I'll help you out like with voting. I'll give you a drive on over. It'll be great. We can chat and stuff about football. He goes, no, I can't do that kind of stuff. And I said, no, seriously, I don't mind. Car, I can drive. He goes, no, seriously, I can't vote. I said, why can't you vote? So that's why I thought my next door neighbor had been convicted of a felony. Interesting way to find this out.
What do you do?
Well, I said, I said, so what'd you do? Yeah, wouldn't you be curious too? He goes, I sold some drugs. That's it? You're denied voting rights for selling drugs? He goes, on a military base? I said, ooh, okay. He knew I worked. He knew I worked for a defense contractor, so he didn't want to tell me. That's why. Otherwise, he would have said that. Yeah, I was like, okay, I see. I'm nervous here. Nah, he's a good guy, obviously, you know. But it is something, and that's why we did research to see that after a certain amount of years, should you be allowed to go back to work again? Should you be restored your voting rights? That's actually a debate going on in Virginia right now. After a certain number of years, when you've served your time, you're out of prison, you've done your parole, shouldn't you be allowed the right to vote, or should it be taken away for the rest of your life? It's a debate.
So like, if he did like sell drugs, like if it was weed, people who are convicted for like using it or sent to jail.
Oh, he didn't get, I figured I learned enough. It was like TMI at that point, so I didn't get more details on it.
Well, like,
Hell of an auto mechanic though. He was really great. He was like MacGyver, that TV show's going on? He could probably just take like a rope and just tie something inside your car and it would work. I'm sorry, Solomon, you were saying? No, I didn't know which, Solomon, I didn't know which drug. Hey, Solomon.
Solid.
I didn't mean to make light of yourself. I didn't know what drug it was.
no, like if, how they're trying to legalize pot nowadays and whatnot. So when it does become legal, people who did go to prison who are convicted felons, would they get their right to vote again?
That is a good question. I have no idea. I've even
But
heard that debate
I
coming
just think
out.
that would be like unfair,
But, I don't know if it would. I just know that when people are pushing for rights of felons, they don't make a difference between drugs and not. I will talk about drugs with federalism. All right, did changing property requirements, like allowing people who didn't own property to vote, Tyree, did it make a difference? Did, okay, how do we know that? I agree with you. I'm sorry, let me make this bigger. I agree with you, I think it made a big difference. There we go. Still kind of small, I'm sorry. I wish I could make this much bigger. How do we know it made a difference? It doubled, just in that election alone, right? The next election after they got rid of property requirements, it doubled from 5 to 10%. And after, over time, it still goes up. So some people, even if they didn't get the word in the backwoods that they didn't have to own property, eventually it got to them. But you can see an immediate effect. Y'all see how that works? Okay, 1870, African Americans get the right to vote. Impact on voting?
Yeah, well.
5%.
Yeah, it's kind of a small one, but still, it declined somewhat in the 1860s for obvious reasons. But here you see, kind of a slight bump up. Still very small, African Americans did not make a huge percentage of the population, so the increase is small, but the group is small. 1919, going into the 1920 election. Sydney, did it make a difference? What?
Not really. 1919?
Yeah, from 1910 to 1920, did voting rights increase? Or voting participation increase? Voting rights increased. Yeah, I think it's the largest jump or largest increase in political participation. Yep, 19th Amendment, 1919. Going to the 1920 election is the single biggest one election jump in American history.
Sorry, I couldn't see.
Oh, okay,
I couldn't tell
gotcha.
what year it was over. It looked like it was overnight.
Let's see, how about in the 1960s when they got rid of poll taxes and literacy tests? Did it make a significant difference? Did we have a big jump up in the 1960s? Wesley, you're shaking your head. What are you reading on this?
I think I see a little block on top of the other block. But
It's pretty small, right? It's not. It may not have affected a ton of people, but certainly voter discrimination anywhere. Like I read about some guy in Miami Beach who was like a World War II veteran who got knocked off the rolls. Somebody just did a big voting purge. Not like the movie Purge, but almost in voting sense. And yeah, he got pushed out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like the guy fought for our country in World War II, and you denied him the right to vote. It's a PR nightmare. It should be. It may still not be a big percentage of the population. How about when 18 to 21-year-olds, Ronald, when they got the right to vote? What do you notice about this? Did it go up? in 1972, which was the first election. So right about here. A significant jump up in population? Sadly, no. From 1972 to 2008, if they weren't dead last, they were near dead last. 18 to 21-year-olds had among the lowest voter turnout, even though they were the newest group to get their rights. I remember being at a political conference where somebody said, like, you know, African Americans voted at much higher rates than 18 to 21-year-olds, regardless of race. It's true. Not until 2008 did younger people turn out in large numbers.
I thought you said you liked that this year too.
Well, that's the big debate. Last piece I saw in the election said millennials are the key to this election. Will they turn out and who will they vote for? It's the deciding vote. To use a Kevin Costner movie quote, it's the swing vote. It's your generation, not mine. Ours already kind of set in their ways. Millennials are free agents. You're the ones. So whether you show up and who you pick will decide who the next president is, probably the next Congress, probably the next several years when we talk about elections. I'll show you election theory that says that you could be setting the tone basically until you're in your 40s, maybe 50s. Something known as critical election theory. It says that a small handful of elections set the tone for the next several years. Like New England Patriots beating the undefeated Houston Texans set the tone. Now everyone realizes, wow, with like half the team being backups, the New England Patriots dominated an undefeated team. So now they're the instant Super Bowl favorite, right? Certain critical elections are statement elections. Yes, yes, like Louisville crushing FSU. I get you. All right. Let's move on to federalism, since you'll need to know it for the example, and it is the one American government factor that people mess up on the exam. So just mentally drink your coffee now. You gotta be on to this. First off, most important thing, you gotta know, by the way, federalism is sad because it's actually one of the most important American contributions to the world. It is one of our leading contributions in terms of political theory. When you hear about political philosophy, our Federalist Papers are right up there with Socrates, with Plato, with Aristotle, with Hobbes, with Locke, with Rousseau. It doesn't always get the same respect, but it should. Because the theories they had about how to organize a government are just that revolutionary. And yes, I don't mind that being on the camera. Before we had federalism, before the United States came on the scene, you had two forms of government. One, which the national government controlled everything. The other, a couple strange times in history, the locals ruled. Go back to think about your movies, like, you go back to like Romans, go back to your Greek city-states. These were all different ways of doing things. The Persian Empire, right? You've heard about some of these. This is not a small thing. Like in the Persian Empire, Persia conquered a whole bunch of countries, and it was run from Persia, or from whatever the capital was at the time, right? They ran everything. They set the policy, everybody followed it. Now, how many of y'all seen the movie 300? Go ahead, raise your hand so I can see. I want to get like I'm not going to I'm going to grade you down, Caitlin, because you saw it. Okay, so a couple of y'all seen it, right? So, that's the Greeks. The Greeks didn't have an empire where they had one person in charge. They had a total badass named Leonidas, but he's not like the, it's swearing again. But the Baptist church isn't much. Okay. But there's no king of Greece or Greek emperor. Greece is a region. City-states would band together in an alliance every so often. They'd compete with each other in Olympic games, but they were all separate countries, city-states. Greece was a neighborhood. Greece was a region. And I mean, you know, what we call Greece, I mean, it's spread out like part of, you know, there's stuff all the way up to Sicily, stuff over in modern day Turkey. Like you ever hear of Troy? The Greek city state, and it's Greeks versus Greeks. It's not Euros versus Asians. Although when I was in Istanbul, they have like Istanbul Europe team and Istanbul Asia team, and they played each other in the Super Bowl of soccer when we were over there. It didn't take us long to figure out who won with all the honking of horns and waving of flags. Kind of cool. That's the second time I've been to some country's soccer Super Bowl. And it always ends the same way. Yeah. All night. The Greek city-states were a confederation. Think of, what are the Greek city-states? Come on, give them to me. Who are the major players? Thank you, Athens. Give me another. Not Athens, Georgia, Sanford Stadium, but you know, Athens. Give me another one. A Greek city-state. They give you him with a 300. Leonidas. Come on, what's another Greek city-state? The what? Well, Troy, yeah. Troy's one. That was a city-state. What else? Give me another. Good Lord. Just give me one, the easy ones.
Sparta.
Sparta, thank you. God, I was like, you're scaring me here. Come on, Michigan State. All right, now who else? Don't y'all read your Bible? Paul's letter to the, well, or some other Greek city-states. You ever heard Paul's letter to the Corinthians? Corinth, an economic powerhouse. Thebes, Syracuse, not the Orangemen, but you know, Syracuse, the Greek city-state, right? You know, they had a whole bunch of city-states all over the place. Milos is another one. They're all dotted all over the landscape. And whenever they faced a threat, like from the Persian Empire, oh my gosh, the Persians are going, they took over everything in Turkey, or as they called it, Asia Minor then. What are we going to do? So they'd all have to band together. Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, Thessaloniki is another Greek city-state. Everybody gets together, what are we going to do? Some said, hey, we'll be part of the Persian Empire, we'll let them take over us. Others said, let's make a deal with them. Sounds Trump-like, but you know, the art of the deal. Others are like, no, we got to fight and resist them, or else they'll take away all of our freedoms that we enjoy. And back and forth. You see? They all had to meet in a conference, and they would argue amongst themselves. A lot. How'd it go in 300? Yeah, it was cool. It was like the Alamo of Greece. They sure held out. They held up those Persian armies and all got killed. Persia took Athens, burned it to the ground, knocked out a bunch of Greek city-states. Luckily, the Greeks rallied for the Greeks, obviously, the Battle of Salamis. They won in the Navy what they couldn't do on land because the Persians just overwhelmed them. They just had the biggest empire. You know, subsequent, then they were, yeah, I know, they won. The Greek army won some other battles. You know, Xerxes left the area, he left the reserve force, they weren't as good. Greeks beat them. You know, but from time to time it was pretty, the Greeks lost a lot too, don't forget that. They won based on like a big hurricane, sank a Persian fleet earlier. The Battle of Marathon, smart strategy, they were able to overcome a Persian invading force. How D-Day could have turned out. Yeah, that's where you get to realize that amphibious landings don't always go well. Other places, Hanseatic League. You know the Hanseatic League. Solomon, you know the Hanseatic League, don't you?
The Hanseatic League?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
No, it's okay. You don't have to. No, it's pretty obscure. It's one of the problems with confederacies. But yeah, it was an alliance of Greek, Polish, Lithuanian, Baltic. It was a country, but it was a confederacy. It doesn't exist anymore. But before America was created, either the locals ruled or the national government ruled. What's Roman Empire? Unitary or confederacy? Yeah, I mean, Rome set the policy. Everyone else had to implement Roman policy. You see how that works? Lots of monarchies are like, it's very top-down. History is like a history of empires, right? Persian Empire, Ottoman Empire, Roman Empire. Do we got another? Charlemagne. You know, they've got Holy Roman Empire, right? You know, so we got a whole bunch of empires, a lot of unitary states. Every so often you got a couple of plucky locals who think they should be in charge without a head or, you know, just maybe a figurehead at most. But that's history coming up to the United States. And your federalists, Federalist paper authors, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, of musical fame, John Jay, J-A-Y, not Jimmy John's, no, John Jay, J-A-Y. 3 Federalists, these were people who realized, well, what was our first government? What was the U.S.'s first government? Do you know it? How was the Continental Congress organized? Which system? Nope, didn't exist yet. Nobody thought it up. The what? Confederation. The Articles of Confederation. You ever heard that one? It meant that states had all the power. Remember? National government had to ask for power. We had a figurehead national government. Our first president is not George Washington. Our first president is like John Hancock or somebody like that. But it's a figurehead. The president of the Continental Congress. Didn't have any real power, and not under the Constitution. We'd been under this system, right, when we were colonists, right? We had this top-down system where King George III and Prime Minister Lord North or George Grenville, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, could force us to do a lot of things. So we didn't like unitary, and confederal government wasn't working for us. There were people who were afraid that, like, Britain would retake us because we were so disorganized. Britain could come back in a rematch, and it wouldn't be like Rocky II. It would be bad. The French could take us over. The Spanish at this point. Heck, we were losing to the Iroquois Confederacy. The Native Americans were beating us. Everybody was beating us. You know, Bobby Bowden told us this, sorry, I'm not supposed to say what happened to the gridiron, but I'll give some of the stuff that he said. He said, like, Georgia would have something saying, like, beat Florida. Florida would have something, you know, have their own sort of, like, beat Alabama. Alabama has stickers saying, beat Auburn. Florida State was so bad before Bobby Bowden took over that their bumper sticker said, just beat anybody. We couldn't beat anybody. And we were in danger of either the British or French taking over us, or what else could have happened? What do you think, Jordan? What do you think also could have happened? How else could we have had a unitary government if the Confederacy just fell apart? Who's seen that great political science movie, Revenge of the Sith? When the Imperial Senate falls apart, they vote too much power to one senator who just so happens to be a Sith Lord. You've all seen this movie? Yeah, it was like a dictatorship could have happened. People were planning that. Yeah, a general could have taken over. A wealthy plantation owner. A faction of people. A Sith Lord could have taken us over, for crying out loud. That lightsaber would have been a huge advantage over our swords and bayonets, right? You remember Natalie Portman? What's her character's name? Princess Amidala or Senator Amidala? Yeah. Jesus. So this is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause. It could have happened. Folks, we could have been a unitary dictatorship where Washington, D.C. really rules us, like more than even conspiracy theorists say. Even today, even democratic countries, like the United Kingdom, like France, like Spain, today even, still have unitary government, where the national government tells everybody else what to do. They're democratic, but there's not a lot of local rights. There's not a lot of local autonomy. Hamilton, Madison, and Jay solved this problem. Federalism, they created a new idea. It said that America doesn't have any political ideas. We borrowed ours from the Greeks, the Brits, the French. We borrowed from Aristotle's ideas of republic. We borrowed from Locke, life, liberty, and property. We borrowed from Montesquieu, separation of powers, checks and balances. We didn't contribute anything. Not true. We contributed federalism. It's a unique American idea. It is now a model for other countries. Other countries are starting to get excited about this federalism idea. It's one reason why, especially new countries that are created, they look to America for inspiration. Some of them are multi-ethnic, multiracial countries, and they're trying to figure out maybe people won't be killing each other if everyone has some local rights as well. pretty important. Here's how it works. I'm going to give you two graphics. Get real graphic here. See, in federalism, this is you all, the red people, which means you're all Republicans. We're communists. I'm just trying to make Brian win. It worked. We get to choose our state leaders and our national government. We get to choose both. In a unitary system, well, actually in an undemocratic unitary system, you don't get to choose jack stuff. In a democratic unitary system like West Europe, or Japan, or Canada, you get to vote for the national government and they pick the local governments, or they control local governments. That's how it works. That's in a unitary system. No, this is different from like Unitarians, the religion. I've given a sermon to Unitarians, but they're not different. And I don't think that they believe that we should have top-down government either. They tend to be a little more libertarian. Confederal systems are, you pick the states pick the national government. Do you see how that works? Before we had the 17th Amendment, you didn't vote for senators. You vote for state legislators. The state legislators chose two of their own to serve in the Senate. Why should you give a rip? Because several politicians across this country are trying to undo this amendment. So states can pick your senators, not you. Don't believe me? Just watch. Yes, Bruno Mars. There are two ways to look at federalism. Yeah, I know it's that elitism and pluralism. Geez, you got to deal with it or drop this course, right? You're going to see elitism and pluralism pop up because it can apply to everything we look at. There are two ways to look at federalism. For elites, anybody here like cake, by the way? Raise your hand if you guys like cake. Y'all like cake? I like cake. This is a good time to teach lunchtime. Go over and get some cake, right? Two different types. Layer cake, you ever seen layer cake? That's the kind I usually make. Why? Because it's easier. My daughter's more of the marble cake. She's better baker than I am. Top down. National government, state government, local government. Almost darn near unitary, right? Wouldn't you agree, Brian? States still do have their own responsibilities, but when push comes to shove, the national government will be supreme. Make sense? There's a clear hierarchy, there's a pecking order. Now, each of these have different roles and responsibilities. How do we know they have different roles and responsibilities? It's in the Constitution. It's in your textbook that you're going to bring in next Friday, right? Good. The other is pluralism, marble cake. Y'all know what the heck marble cake is? No, it does not involve marbles. That's a myth. What's marble cake like? You got, it's all over the place. There's no like segments, right? You got chocolate, vanilla, and whatever the hell else goes in.
I think it's just
Frosted and vanilla, right? It's all swirled on in. There's no organization, just like my daughter's stuff. You should see her room, it's a mess. You should see mine, marble cake model. See, sometimes the national's in charge, right? Sometimes the frosting's on top. Sometimes it's down the middle. Sometimes the bottom. Sometimes the state's on top. Sometimes the local's on top. Sometimes that vanilla's up there. Sometimes it's the chocolate. Sometimes it's the frosting, right? It's swirled all around. In marble cake pluralism, that's how it is. Sometimes the states are in charge. Sometimes the national government's in charge. Sometimes the locals have the power. They have the power. It doesn't sound like something. They have the power. Right? It varies, issue to issue, time period to time period. Who's in charge? Well, who's number one? Oh, everyone knows it's Alabama, but it could be Ohio State next week.
I don't know, a little bit, Mike Williams.
Elitism would say the same teams are on the top. They're the elite teams. They'll always be there. Others are like, hey, Louisville can knock off a really good Florida State team. Last slide for today.
Hey,
Then we'll get into drinking, drugs, and guns in school.
oh, you bring bombs.
No, I'm not bringing it, I'm just bringing the slides. I say I'm bringing it, that's what I mean. You can read about these. Here are the words that we use, they're in the Constitution. These are national powers, that's what the national government get. We use fancy terms like enumerated. Here's the way to remember. You gotta take the headphones off for this one, so you can catch this. The best way to remember it for the exam, enumerated power, like national and enumerated. Just, you keep the E silent. Enumerated and national, that's how you remember it. What this is this is all the stuff only the national government can do. Only the national government can issue currency. You don't get freaking Delaware currency. You don't get Georgia, well, you get Georgia quarters, but the national government minted them to keep states happy. Right?
Yeah.
You know, only the national government can have an army. Sorry, Texas. The Texas Rangers will have to be a baseball team. There are Texas Rangers, yeah, but they don't have supremacy over the national army. They're kind of a local militia force. They provide the army and the navy. They are the ones to declare war. And declare a war is over. So even if Massachusetts wants to surrender, sorry, you can't. That's the decision of the national government to do. Do you understand how this works?
Yeah.
Then we have things like reserve powers, state, R-E-S, state and S in reserve. There is no N in reserve powers. Enumerated, there's an N and an N, right? You see how that works?
Yeah.
Enumerated has no S. National has no S, no state. You see how that works? Okay, whatever you use to keep this in mind, figure out your strategy. The state powers, these are all the things that states can do that national government cannot. The states run the election, did you know that? You're like, that's why some states like Indiana, they require like a national ID and they barely have any pre-election voting days. Ohio, you can show up half drunk on election day, fill out a ballot, and you get to vote. State by state, that's why North Carolina is trying to ban students from voting, not using student IDs. You have to use a special North Carolina ID. Do you have to pay for it? Geez, that would be a poll tax. Now you see why there's some trouble. You know, the states are in charge of, they're supposed to be the lead on law enforcement and safety. And measures for public health, safety, and morals, that's where the guns and drugs and drinking comes in. You can figure out how states. Now the last thing to know is concurrent, right? Does that make sense? Concurrent, something happens at the same time. Concurrent, at the same time Georgia wins this weekend, Auburn wins this weekend. Both games happen at the same time. Or do they? Well, somebody's going to win at the same time Auburn wins. Wait, who's Auburn play?
LSU.
Oh shit. When they win, it's on tape. Take that, Kirk Herbstreit. Concurrent powers mean they happen at the same. Both can do it. Does that make sense? Like both can tax, which sucks, but both can do it, right? Both have courts. We have state courts. We have local courts. Judge David Fowler, our one of the political science professors. He's a local judge. We have federal judges. We do. Does that make sense? We have federal prosecutors, we have local prosecutors, right? Both can charter banks. You can have a Georgia bank and a national bank, correct? Federal Reserve. Both of them have some law-making ability, right? State legislature, Georgia General Assembly can pass something, so can the House of Representatives and the Senate. Make sense? This is where we stop today. Get those papers to me, however you get it. Can I give you one last quote? But remember this for your sporting events this weekend, next weekend. It's a quote from Hannibal. Can I borrow you for a second? Hannibal said, "I will find a way or I will make a way." So find or make a way to get that paper to me today.
Free all weekend long.
You like all last week, can't do this. We just, it's good to see you, Carl. You like it?
No, it's actually, I cannot.
No, that's
No, it's up to you. let me know. So you tell me
I'm
yes.
stressed.
Are you?
Yes, I had 3 papers
I
this
just
week,
think that
like
you
acting
know, it's a good
projects.
opportunity to capture your.
Yes, this project's acting, like,
You wanna be great.
I thought it was gonna be like a simple piece of paper.
And it was pretty good paper too. So next week, can I sign you up as a political science major or minor if you're interested?
Of course,
Awesome. It seems like you're following everything pretty well.
I'm trying.
All right.
See you next week.
Let me know. Ask questions, you got them.